Welcome. It's so lovely to see all three of you.
Hey.
Thank you.
So this is a documentary that covers how you all covered the 2020 primary. And I imagine looking back, even when I watch any TV now where people are interacting with other people, it gives me anxiety. But this is actually footage of you in large groups of people very recently.
It's Bizarro World, right? That's what it looks like. It's this alternate universe that you kind of remember, but you don't remember. Yeah, and I would agree. Especially when Caitlyn is standing there in that huge crowd.
I know.
It's like, what are you doing? Get out of there.
And I'm like shaking hands with voters and like I hug a few people and I'm like watching it. I'm like, I touched someone. Like that did actually happen once.
Remember how it feels.
I also want to ask, when you cover a campaign, I think that those of us who watch it from a distance, we think that we are in tune with what candidates are saying, but you are hearing more often than not the exact same stump speech over and over again. Does it feel like Groundhog Day? Is it exactly the same?
Yes, for the most part, yes. Donald Trump is a little bit different. I mean, he actually does just kind of do his own thing most times, and Caitlyn can tell you that. But most candidates, It's remarkable. I mean, I've been covering campaigns on the road since 2000, and I can still recite a big part of Bill Bradley's stump speech. Recite John McCain's stump speech from 2008 because it becomes like the song in your head that you hear in the street won't go away.
And it's really weird because you can expect to hear the joke. Oh, here comes that joke, 7,000th time, and there it is.
I can't imagine anything more terrifying than knowing an Amy Klobuchar joke is coming.
That James Madison joke. I mean, 700 times.
Also, I can't imagine a less sort of necessary party trick than being able to recite Bill Bradley's 2000 stump speech. Dana, you must do this for everyone.
Today.
So I also want to talk about, this was I think a primary that nobody could predict. And then all of a sudden, after South Carolina, it just coalesced so quickly behind Joe Biden. And you sort of didn't know what was going to happen. And then so quickly, a state that is obviously more likely not going to be a Republican state when it votes in the general, decided the path of this primary. Were you all surprised being out on the road with these candidates, how quickly the party coalesced behind Joe Biden?
Well, I was traveling with Amy Klobuchar, and it was astonishing to see. You were just talking about how we've memorized the stump speeches as they're reciting them. When she went from saying her stump speech one day to flying to Dallas to standing next to Joe Biden, extracting her name out of that stump speech that we had all memorized and inserting Joe Biden's name. It was that shocking and stunning. So it was incredibly fast, and it happened, it felt overnight.
There's certainly been some analysis, or I should say some opining that this is actually playing to Joe Biden's favor right now, that he's managing a campaign, due to the restrictions of the pandemic, whereas it seems like these restrictions are driving the president crazy, that he is sort of desperate to be out in front of people. Caitlyn, I would like to see if that's your read on it as well.
No, he's like going stir crazy basically, because the president isn't someone who only campaigns when he has an election coming up. He's been campaigning his entire presidency. I mean, we have never really stopped doing these rallies. They've amped up sometimes during around the midterms, gone down to others, but we've always had rallies. And so that's what was a staple of obviously 2016 for him. And so you've talked to several White House officials who say, we just got to get him out of the White House. Like, even if it's just going down the street, to the Veterans Affairs building or, anywhere in Washington. And they just really know that he needs to get out, because when he's around people, it puts him in a better mood. And when he's just sitting at the White House, he goes stir crazy. And then that makes his aides, then they have all of this list of demands of things that he wants. And so they want the president out on the road. And so that's something that they are having to deal with. And I think we've seen, you know, the negative aspects of that, or of those rallies that he did hold during the pandemic. And clearly they've learned their lesson, and that is not something that, you know, they're trying or even attempting anymore.
I want to talk about the fact that, you know, Dana, I know you've talked to Dr. Birx and Ki-Young. I know you've actually been in hospitals where people are treating the virus, actual medical professionals. How, I don't know if distressing is the right word, but, you know, how different is, you know, what you're seeing of Ki-Young in actual, you know, medical facilities and what you're hearing from Dr. Birx, Dana? Like, is it frustrating that you can't get a straight answer from this administration? And how different is their answer from what you're seeing on the ground?
I just came back from El Centro, California, where there's a disproportionate number of Hispanic patients. It is a town that is 80% Latino. It is impoverished. And if you look at what this entire community is going through, where there's a call, an emergency COVID call for the fire department every 30 minutes, and then you listen to one meeting out of the White House or one press conference, it has no connection to what we are seeing on the street. It has no relevance to the doctors who we're interviewing, to the patients who are connected to ventilators, to the hospitals who are treating people in military tents in American soil. So it feels, you were just talking about Bizarro World, right? We look back at this documentary and it feels like a million years ago. It feels, trying to cover this story today, it feels like Bizarro World right now.
And somebody like Dr. Birx, you know, the reason why I think the interview became such a thing is because she was speaking honestly, and she was trying to sound the alarm in a way that we haven't really heard from her. We've heard it from Dr. Fauci in layman's terms, which is why he's become America's doctor, right? Because he speaks English in a way that people can understand. Dr. Birx is more of a statistician, and so that's the way he started to talk, but then kind of got her to the point where she laid it out, saying that we are in a new phase, that the Midwest is in a very dangerous position. And that, you know, after that, the president got really mad at her because she was laying out the truth as opposed to laying out the reality that the president is trying to create for people.
Do you sort of feel like when you're interviewing her, you can see in real time as she does that calculation of knowing there are really important things to say and then what will be the fallout from the White House because she said it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, that happens. I mean, you see it and hear it from her. Fauci actually sometimes just articulates, like, I'm not going to say it exactly as you're asking me because I can't give you the soundbite that will word everything. He actually says it. The fine line that we walk is something that I don't think any of us could even imagine.
Caitlin, you got to ask the president, and I'm sure when you were coming up as a Cub reporter, this was the sort of question you'd hope you'd get to ask. About a doctor he was touting who, among other things, has also talked about alien DNA. And, well, I guess my question is, when you ask a question like that, I mean, you must have to be careful in the phrasing to make sure that people know you're actually talking about a real thing.
No, and you do, and you never would imagine asking that. And I even left out the most scandalous parts of this woman's, you know, dissertation that she's put online, talking about demon sex, talking about these things that I actually looked into them and read and listened to her sermons that she had given, because I wanted to make sure I fully understood what she was saying and that it wasn't being taken out of context. And it wasn't, but the question is, how do you sum that up to make it a question in the briefing room? And you saw how the president responded. I mean, he clearly wasn't aware of this woman's statements before, but then even after we had told him what she had said, you know, he stood by her and he continued to elevate her. And it's a remarkable moment when you're in a pandemic, and we've had so many moments where I was in the briefing room when the bleach disinfectant suggestion came up from the president. You've been there, and other times when he's left the rose garden on us because he didn't like our questions. But I think truly that this took the cake, having to ask the president about a woman that says she thinks they're trying to come up with a vaccine so people won't become religious.
And while I admire your restraint and not bringing up the demon sex, I want you to know that we covered it. We covered it more than anybody could have possibly wanted.
I'm sure you did
as well. This. Yeah, You know, obviously going into this primary, it was as diverse a field as we've seen from any major political party. You know, we've obviously ended up in a place where, you know, for lack of a better term, we have, you know, a couple of elderly, distinguished white gentlemen as our nominees. But, you know, the other thing that comes across in the documentary is the, you know, the reporters who cover these things are more diverse than ever before. Can you guys just speak to, you know, how important that is to have it viewed through a different spectrum than just, you know, white male, you know, news reporters?
Well, I think that just real quickly, I mean, if you look at this report that just came out yesterday, the number of women who are running for Congress, who are women of color, is 3 times the number that it was in 2016. So the people who are running for office, who want to represent this country, look different. And the press has to look different. And Dana has been doing this a whole lot longer than I have in the political space. And I mean, she's seeing it in real time change, right? From the boys on the bus to now many more girls on the bus. And that includes girls of color like me. So it is changing, and it has to change because America's changing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say I'm the grizzled veteran of this trio, and I can't tell you how different it looks, not just on the stump, but in the press pen, because it was really mostly dudes when I first started. There were some women, but it was mostly men and mostly white men. And it has gradually and slowly changed. But I think this year, 2020, it was much more stark. And it had to be, as Young said, to represent, to mirror what we were actually seeing from the candidates.
Well, I really appreciate all 3 of you making time for us today. I mean this genuinely. We could never do a show like ours if people like you weren't out doing your job. And keep up the great work.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.